everyone, and welcome to the Season 2, Episode 1 of Point of View, a series of leadership discussions by amazing workplaces. We sincerely believe that no workplace can become amazing without the people who lead and show the way and who relentlessly work on the various aspects of creating happy and productive workplaces. They are the real leaders, not just in title, but in the true sense of the word. Through Point of View series, I'm getting into a discussion with these leaders from various organizations spread across India as well as across borders. The idea is to get into conversation with them, to get them to share their views about the various aspects that make organizations really amazing. The purpose is to understand what drives leaders to their own workplaces so that we can delve deeper into the corporate philosophy and share with you path breaking ideas. Ideas that come straight from people who have gone ahead and changed their workplace to make them better, more inviting, and extremely thriving for their own people. Our guest on the show today is a thought leader in the space of financial services, consumer tech, and healthcare sector. He has had a rich industry experience spanning over a decade and a half in establishing and propelling businesses in the financial services sector on the growth pathway. He is truly a people's person, and people who have worked with him not just find him to be bright, articulate, and passionate about business plans, processes, and technology, but also extremely supportive and empathetic towards his team. Let me present to you Dhruv Dhanraj Behel, a young and dynamic leader and an operations wizard. Dhruv is the Chief Operating Officer at BharatPay. In his current role, he is responsible for customer support, deployments, QR, swipe and cards, KYC, loan and disbursals, and lead generation. A Boston University graduate in biomedical engineering, Dhruv also has a postgraduate degree in financial engineering from Cass Business School and an MBA from INSEAD. Being an extremely successful millennial, Dhruv exudes confidence and loves to forge strong relationships with people he works with. He's an engaging thinker who can dissect a problem, figure out solutions, and pretty much go execute to a successful end. Logical and methodological in his approach, he has the knack of not just solving a problem, but also ensuring it does not happen again. So, welcome, Dhruv. It's a pleasure to have you on our show today.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for me being here. And congratulations on season two. I think I've gone through. I'm an avid listener of your series, and I love the work that you're doing. So I'm quite humbled to be invited to be episode one of the season two.
Thank you so much. That's an honor. Each word that you say is an honor for us. Thank you so much. So, Dhruv, in a career spanning a decade and a half, you have reached the position of a chief operating officer. This is truly a phenomenal success story. So, just tell us, retrospecting over your journey, what are some of the key aspects, attributes, or decisions that you feel have led you to achieve the position that you are in your career today? Yeah.
Okay, I think quite a deep question. You know, I think success has come from the people I work with. It has come from the people who have supported me and given me those opportunities. It has come from being in the right place at the right time. But if I look at um, you know uh, if I look at my entire career, I think there are a few decisions that I've made which have really helped me. And the most important one has been my decision to come back and focus on India every time. So I studied in Boston, I studied in London, I studied in France and Singapore during my time at INSEAD. And each time I chose, while having alternate offers, I chose to come back to work in India. I think when you look at India, what you see is this growth story, is this exponential growth story, which opens up a bunch of opportunities in a very unstructured way, but also allows you to sort of leapfrog over certain conventional growth paths that might have been there in more structured and mature markets. So I think coming back to India for me has definitely been, maybe the first most important factor in what you have called the success story. But I think the other one for me importantly is having a plan, right? A well thought out strategy. Um, Knowing where I want to be, knowing what my point of arrival in life is, and working towards that. And let me tell you, some plans have worked out and some plans have not worked out. But the ability to iterate and constantly, adapt, and be sort of malleable to, how times have changed or conditions have changed or circumstances have changed, but largely knowing what the larger plan is, what are you going towards, what are you moving towards, has been extremely important. The one thing that I know worked very well for me, is knowing my strengths, but also knowing my weaknesses. So, for example, I know I'm not a great 0 to 1 guy. So I remember when I was, joining, Bharat Pay, my wife told me very clearly that it's a 15-month-old company. Why are you joining them? You yourself say that you're not great at very early stage. And I said, look, I'm joining Bharat Pay when it's clearly in the tens and the hundreds, from an aging perspective. So I know where I'm good at. I also know when I go to very large organizations, very well set up organizations, I don't find myself relating to them. For example, I did a very short stint at Airtel. I did not seem to relate to the scale of the organization at that point in my career. Maybe sometime later I might find it to be the right place for me, but at that point in my career, it wasn't the right choice. So I think knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, is extremely important. Other than that, I think put in the hard work. That's about it, right? Put in the hours, work hard. There is no substitute for it. Roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, execute on your own, is extremely important. And I think while you're doing that, welcome adversity. So Malcolm X said, there is no better teacher than adversity. I think you need to challenge, you need to face challenges, you need to welcome adversity, you need to welcome friction, but not because it makes for great gossip or it makes for great drama, but because it is an opportunity to easily identify what needs to be solved, and solve that problem and then move on, right? Learn from it and move on. So I think these are some of the things that have really worked for me. Come back to India, have a plan, uh, know my strengths and my weaknesses, put in the hard work, face adversity head on. I think these are just some of those things that have really worked for me well in the last so many years.
Thank you so much, Dhruv. In fact, each point that you have raised, like working on a strategy, coming back to India, trying a market which is not mature, which is still, trying to understand how to operate in the best manner, and having a
Yeah.
set of people who can see what are your strengths and weaknesses and guide you accordingly. And last and not
Yeah.
the least, hard work that you mentioned. Yeah. And also talking about adversities, like we were just talking about a small issue that we had just before this recording. And in an instant, kind of we countered that. And I think
Yeah.
those are the things that really actually make you in the long run. Thank you so
Yep.
much, Dhruv, for a wonderful answer that you gave.
Thank you.
And, okay, so Dhruv, tell me one thing. You joined Bharat Pay as head of operations in Jan 2020, which is last year. And you were soon
Yeah.
interested with the responsibilities of a chief operating officer due to your exemplary performance in the company. Well, as an
Yeah.
operations leader, developing high performing teams to meet the operational goals, um, right? What is your mantra for creating a team that never lets you down?
This is a great question. I think, firstly, I must say that at the outset, I always tell everyone I'm very lucky that I've had very diverse experiences. Right, I've handled large teams at organizations like Fortis and Paytm. I have handled very, very high performing teams at organizations like Bain. I have also, had the opportunity to both work at places like Roadzen and now at Bharat Pay more so, where we only hire the best. And we challenge ourselves to be a very lean and a very, very fiscally responsible business. So we don't overhire, we don't throw warm bodies at people. And I think that there's 4 or 5 key things that really fit in here. Right. The first one, which is most important, and I don't say this lightly, is you should hire people that are smarter than you. That's what I do. I always hire people who are smarter than me, and I hire them and I get out of their way. I let them execute because that's the reason why I brought them in, right? Is for them to deliver, is for them to execute. But before I do that, I think the second most important thing which comes into play in a high functioning team is establishing trust. Right. You have to establish a trust. It's an operating trust. It's an implicit trust. But I think the way it comes is through communicating. I think sometimes teams tend to not communicate enough. And I think over communicating is never bad. At least that's my style, right? It's always good to over communicate. It's good to listen a little more. It's good to talk a little more in the early days so that you understand each other's, style and strategy as time goes on. But you know that communication is then coupled with what I think is the third most important part of this equation, which is clear targets and deliverables. So you've got smart people who you trust, who you are communicating with, and who know exactly what they're chasing after, who know exactly what is expected of them. And because of this entire situation, you will start seeing teams pick up velocity very, very soon and start delivering very, very soon. But often enough, when you're in very competitive environments like we are in the fintech space in India, you will realize that not everything is very easily delivered. There are a lot of challenges, and I think that's where the importance of a leader comes in. You need to engage your team, and be collaborative. You need to be, there's a difference between listening and hearing. I often tell people that listening is far more critical. You need to sit down, you need to listen to them. Sometimes you just need to allow them to arrive on the answer by themselves by using you as a bouncing board of ideas. Hey, what about this, what about this? The Socratic method of learning is extremely critical in this part. And I think the last thing which is important in any high functioning team is acknowledging and celebrating milestones. Now, those milestones can be successes. They can also be failures. At least the culture we have built here is a culture where we celebrate failures as much as we celebrate successes, because a failure tells us what we shouldn't be doing, and the fact that we've all learned it. And if we celebrate it, we end up acknowledging, everyone across the board start acknowledging what shouldn't be done. So I think these are some of the learnings that we've had. And at least for me, through the years of managing teams, these are the critical aspects of building as you called it, a high performing team.
Thank you, Dhruv. You put it so beautifully. The entire journey of an employee, right from hiring the best people, trusting them, setting goals, and then them performing, and then finally, celebrating the victories. So, Dhruv, tell me one thing. Before joining Bharat Pay, you were in the
Mm-hmm.
leadership team at Roadzen, donning the
Yeah.
hat of the chief business officer and steering the organization's business across geographies.
Yeah.
Well, as an organization expands its operations and teams become larger, there's a fear of the organization's culture getting diluted.
Yeah.
And when an organization is expanding, vertically as well as horizontally, how can it maintain its culture through its functional and geographical boundaries?
Okay. This is a interesting and a very intense question. But it's also something very close to my heart because our CHRO Jasneet always tells us this. She says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you really need to have a strong culture in an organization to succeed. I think the first most important thing is have a simple value system, right? Everyone from, I use this term called from doorman to chairman. Everyone from doorman to chairman has to live, eat, breathe that system. Have a simple value system in the organization. And when you have that simple value system, Every time you expand, you will hire more people, you will bring new talent in, you will replace older talent. Set the standard of who comes into your organization. Set the standard of who comes into your family, right? um, be very, very clear that it's okay to have a vacancy versus a bad hire. It's okay to have a delayed GTM versus or a go-to-market strategy versus um, a, a person who is not aligned to your family's values, um, and then representing you in front of other people or even interacting with other members of the family, because that will lead to um, adverse outcomes and not something that you want to truly desire. Once you have this system set up, I think the next thing that you need to solve for is, I keep saying this again and again, communication, right? Be very clear. What is the communication for reviewing performance? What is the communication for handling escalations? What is the communication channel for performance feedback? Once the cadence, which is the frequency with which you do these conversations and how you do them, the method and the format is set, then there is no discrepancy between in the organization. There is no, you'll never have accusations of favoritism or nepotism. If it's very clear saying ye values hain, is frequency pay we evaluate you, and this is how we evaluate you, then the fundamentals are very clear, right? And once you get this value system in place, I think then the imperative shifts towards the leadership. Then the leadership has to do two things always. That, at least that's what I do, and I'll speak about what I do. Is one, show up. No business is built in air conditioned boardrooms. Show up for a meeting, show up to your merchant in the field, show up to your customers, show up to your team members. Even if anything simple as, I went to have a meal with one employee in a city at his house because he's an alone employee in that city. And, what do you do? We don't even have an office in that city, but every day he's on the road, he's on the streets. So I spent the day with him on the streets, but then I came home and had a meal at his house with him. And I think that feeling of just showing up, that someone showed up to spend the day with that person, that I think keeps the culture alive. And I think as you grow as an organization, the other thing that business leaders definitely need to do, we look at performance, and we get saying, so it's a 2x2. Just look at it like a matrix, right? And think about saying, on one axis, it's about how good am I for the organization in terms of output and impact. And on the other side, it's about how good am I for the organization in terms of cultural alignment. So if I'm very, very good culturally, but I'm not giving you output, should I be in the organization? Similarly, if I'm giving great output, but I'm not culturally aligned, should I be? And I think there's this line beyond which you need to be able to balance both. You need to be culturally aligned and give results. Because if you don't give results, then you create a culture of underperformance. If you give results, but you're not culturally aligned, then you give a culture of lone wolfing, what I call each man for himself.
Right. Thank you so much. That's again was you told me that it was a deep question. It was a deep answer that you gave actually. So, through being a millennial leader, how do you foresee the world of work changing with the entry of Gen Zs? And what is your piece of advice to them? And what is it that you think we need to learn from them?
एक क्वेश्चन में आपने मेरे को मेरी एज याद दिला दी. Okay. I think my team is extremely young across the board, and we are getting younger as we keep adding more people. So I think, for me, Gen Z is this amazing generation which is more secure and more aware than even Gen X or Gen Y, right? As a generation, they have access to knowledge, they have access to opportunities. They are born in a time when India is no longer about doctor bano, engineer bano, accountant bano. It's, at least that was my generation, right? And so, the this generation is willing to experiment, they're willing to take risks. I think this generation is going to change the dynamic in India. It's going to bring the golden age of innovation, the golden age of startups in India. We are the, maybe within the top 5 economies or the top 10 economies, we are the youngest country by age. And with that, we have this opportunity of a very, very secure, very active, very virile workforce willing to enter in and take risks and do and experiment. What that's going to do, the first level for me, I think, is this is a digital first organization. Like, you literally go anywhere, the first thing you see is everyone stuck to their phones like this, right? They are born interacting with technology. Unlike me, unlike you, they have not learned technology over time. They have been born with technology, and they have been born with 90th percentile technology. You and I saw the fax, then the fax became the email, then the email became on phone. We had BlackBerry in the middle of that somewhere. They just leapfrogged the entire thing. They're just born with saying, sir, email is email. Exactly, right? They're born into technology, right? And I think that disruption in the workplace, how they challenge me to use technology, has changed. I remember I'm the kind of guy who used to keep to-do lists, and now I use Trello because my team forces me to use that, right? And I think listening to them has made me richer. This is also a generation which is very vocal. They're very collaborative. I think because of the plethora of opportunities, they are not living in a dog-eat-dog world, which was, no offense to anyone, but was our country 20, 30 years ago, when there were very few opportunities and very many people for those few opportunities. I think this is a generation which is, as I said, secure, and by virtue of that, very collaborative. I think the two places where I feel, the generation needs to learn a few things from us, right? Is Gen Z is used to signal overload. I call it signal overload. Constantly being hit by signals, ads. हमारे ज़माने में ad होती थी 2 मिनट की, पूरी ट्यून होती थी, पूरा गाना बनता था. Today the ad is 6 seconds before a video on YouTube, or 5 seconds between Insta stories, right? That signal overload causes them to bring that behavior to the workplace as well. So they enter into the workplace, and now suddenly they want signal overloads from us as well. Basically. Yeah, quick results, quick communication, constant feedback. And what effectively I will term it as is a lack of patience.
Yeah, definitely.
And what people don't realize is that business, or dhanda as I like to call it, is built quarter on quarter, year on year. Right? And technology cycles are shortening. But it's still, today the average age of technology transformation is 18 months.
Right.
It still takes 18 months to change the technology, but it then takes another 36 months to get people to learn and adopt that technology. So you need to have that patience. Nothing happens. Rome wasn't built overnight, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have that patience. And I think that is something where they, need to learn that the merit of the argument will always win, not that effort put in. I put so much time in, or it's been 5 days since the last time we had this conversation. Let things play out, and if the right result is coming, it will automatically take up. The merit will make it win. And I think that's something that Gen Z needs to still learn from, millennials.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, I'm asking, how do we teach it to them?
When I was starting my career, I was very, very fortunate, Ekta, of getting very good mentors, getting very good coaches. I still actively pay that forward. I do anywhere between 3 to 5 coffee chats, even with my schedule. I will take a time on my weekends. I will take a time during the week, and I will try and mentor people. I will try and teach them. And I think that's something that, can't be taught. It is a part of it will come from work. Part of it will come from your friends and family. Part of it will come from what I call train the trainer. You will teach someone, they will go and teach that skill to the people that they're close to their tribe. But I think the concept of mentoring has got lost. Again, signal overload, too much work, too many opportunities, too fast. Everything's moving too fast. So I think teaching them will come through active mentoring and coaching, and I think that's our generation's responsibility to keep that practice of mentoring and coaching alive.
Right. It was wonderful having you on Point of View today. It was a great conversation. Thank you once again for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, Dhruv. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to our channel for latest updates on leadership interviews, webinars and educative videos related to human resources, learning and development, culture, employee engagement, and many more.